What's up, Brandon Smitley here from BrandonSmitley.com, ThirstGym.com, Thirst Gym, here with a Thirst for More podcast, and we're doing another lecture series here today on this lovely Friday. So if you happen to be listening over on the lovely Spotify, Apple iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, episode 42, appreciate you having you on after the fact. And if you want to keep up with this information, the lecture side is all over on the YouTubes. You can find me at bsmitley, type in Brandon Smitley. You will find that all on YouTube. So not going to go any further here today. We're going to get started with our lecture series. And today is understanding macronutrients, the role of protein, carbs, and fats in performance. So we're kind of doing macronutrient 101. So we kind of have an idea of what's going on here. So if you happen to be a newer athlete or you really just don't know anything much about protein, carbs, and fats, we're going to kind of break that down really quick, simple today over on the YouTubes. And if you're listening again after the fact over here on this episode. So things we're going to discuss today, we're going to talk about a brief overview of macronutrients, so your protein, your carbs, and your fats, and the importance of macronutrients for athletic performance and overall health. And obviously, if you're trying to lose weight, gain muscle, all that kind of stuff, this is still going to apply to you. So it's not just athletic performance, but obviously performance is one of the key areas that I focus on. So that's kind of how we're drifting the discussion here today. So the first thing that we're going to talk about as I adjust here is we're going to talk about protein and why is protein important. So it's essential for obviously repairing and building the muscle fibers as you work out, supporting strength and power development, optimizing recovery after workouts. That's kind of what everyone thinks about when it comes to protein is, how can we use that protein to improve our performance, recover, do all the things, right? And that's the major thing I want you to take away here from the protein side is understanding that that's what it's for. And the key functions of protein are going to be that muscle repair and growth, builds muscle damage during exercise. So the general, foundation of the way exercise works is that you don't really grow in the gym. You do everything from a recovery standpoint, so you grow after the fact. The gym, the training workouts are all the stimulation to make the progress that you want to make. And then the protein is going to help repair and regrow that tissue so that it can come build back bigger, stronger, faster, more explosive for the next bout of thing that you do. And then you just stack those days over time. But protein is the building block of that, and more specifically, the amino acids from the protein. I'm not going into super depth of the science here today. That's not necessarily my realm. I think there's tremendously better people out there that can do all the discussion. If you happen to want to go in those weeds, this goal here today is to just kind of talk about the basics. That's why it's 101, and how you take actionable steps here with your protein. So it's crucial for building your lean muscle mass. Basically, the thing you need to know there for your functions of your protein, why you eat it. It's also going to help with your recovery from that strength training, and so it's going to reduce the soreness, speed up recovery, and then obviously supports the adaptations to training. So this is all kind of linked together. There's nothing super crazy here in terms of what it does, but basically build muscle, repair, recover from training is the number one reason why you're focusing on protein. So let's talk about what the best protein sources are. So if you happen to be animal-based, chicken, turkey, lean beef, eggs, dairy are usually going to be your primary sources that you go for your protein. That's, fish is another option. Usually that's kind of seen more in like the vegan based approach. But again, animal-based sources are going to be your primary go-to. That's because of the amino acid profile. And those amino acids are, you have to get these from food. Your body can't make them. So there's 8 essential amino acids. You're going to get those from your meat sources every single time you eat them. You're also going to get added vitamins and minerals and stuff from animal-based protein. And generally speaking, animal-based protein is going to be better for building tissue. But there are plant-based options. So your plant-based options are tofu, temp, lentils, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, quinoa. You can still get protein from this. Your peanut butter and bread is the very common one. Beans and rice are another common combination to get a complete protein, because once you take those amino acids together and you combine them, they are then going to form that full protein, because you're going to have all the amino acids. And that's why I didn't want to go too crazy into the amino acid side. It's just so that this was more understandable of what you want. But you want complete protein to be able to build muscle ideally. And the idea behind the plant-based side is that you're going to combine those amino acids from several different sources to do that. And your animal-based ones, you're not going to have to do that. Obviously, other options here that are not mentioned, because I do want to make sure that they are mentioned, but I don't want them to be what you focus on. But obviously, you're going to have protein powder, protein bars, different protein-based supplements are obviously another option there. So the big question, becomes, how much protein do athletes need, or how much protein do you need? General guideline is usually 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And I know, why do you use kilogram? Well, that's what most of the research does. America's the only one that technically uses pounds in their body weight. So that's what we're usually accustomed to. Generally speaking, here's a very easy way to figure this out in pounds: is you just take your body weight, divide it in half. So for me, that's 150. That would be 75. That's about 75 kilograms is about what I am. I'm actually less than that, so you can round down a little bit. But then you can just multiply that by 2, and that gets you back up to basically your body weight. You need a little bit less. So if you try to do some estimations, just basically take your body weight and subtract about 10%. That's going to be the easiest route. So for me, 150 minus 10% minus 15 is 135. That's a good idea. It's going to get me in that. That's a general guideline. You can be in different areas, but the rule of thumb is about a pound per body weight, or a gram per pound of lean body weight. But you can have higher intakes for strength training and intense endurance-based activities, which I think is also important to notice. Is kind of what we're talking about here. Is the athletic population, or people that are training, being more active. You are going to want more protein because you're actively doing things to break muscle tissue down. And then we're going to have that extra protein available. And more importantly, it's not necessarily the total, which I think is important. At the end of the day, that is important. But it's also more important to understand that if you're eating more total protein, usually you're going to have more protein spread throughout the day. So you're going to have a more steady stream of amino acids constantly in your blood as you be able to go to build that tissue. So as you break it down amino acids, they're not going to be in your blood. Your blood's obviously constantly going around your body. So when your body needs to pull those amino acids, they're more readily available. That's the theory there. Okay. It doesn't mean that you have to eat protein 6 times a day to maximize it. It may be a little bit more easily digestible in your body, and there could be some benefits there. But priority number 1 is getting enough. So you estimate around that gram per pound of body weight, give or take, and then try to spread out as much as you can that works well with your lifestyle. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into so many different meals. So protein timing for maximum endurance, I've already kind of bled into this. As I go to the next slide here, we're going to talk about pre and post-workout nutrition a little bit. And pre-workout, your protein is going to support the muscle preservation and energy. And again, kind of talking about having those amino acids readily available. So as you're breaking stuff down, your body can then go and grab that next amino acids that are theoretically available to start maximizing that recovery. So an example would be to have 20 to 30 grams of protein 1 to 2 hours before you do your training, whether this be sport practice, whether this be in the gym, your workouts, doesn't matter. 20 to 30 grams. And this can be super easy to get in today's society. Some people will use protein shakes. Some people will use different kind of protein or sport bars. You can literally have a very small meal. You can literally do some bread, some peanut butter, and then maybe, like a little bit of cottage cheese. We'll talk about some different tips and things here in a little bit, but there's lots of ways to get that 20, 30 grams. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you just want those amino acids readily available. Post-workout is going to be critical for the recovery and growth side. I kind of am a believer that if you do the pre-workout stuff well, the post-workout stuff isn't as important because it's already in your bloodstream. You can go eat a regular meal. This isn't old school bodybuilding science where you have to have a protein shake immediately after you work out. Researchers kind of said that the protein intake for the day is number 1. And if you want to optimize that recovery, you still want a little bit of protein after your workout, but you have a window of up to like 3 hours where you're going to get a lot of the same benefits, where you don't have to have that protein shake immediately as soon as you're done. That's kind of volatile. It's just convenient for a lot of people, I will say that, because after you're done working out, you're usually thirsty, you usually start to get a little bit hungry. You can put down a protein shake with a little bit of carbohydrates. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then that can hold you over until you can get to a solid meal. And I think that's kind of important as the convenience side. But generally speaking, you want 20 to 40 grams of protein within 30 minutes of exercise if you're not going to go have a solid meal. If you're going to have a solid meal, you can kind of ignore that because you're going to automatically check that post-workout box. Practical tips here are going to be to plan your meals and snacks with protein every 3 to 4-ish hours. One, that's kind of designed so that you're not constantly hungry. And we kind of talked about having that constant stream of amino acids, if at all possible. But again, there's no major benefit to having meals every 3 to 4 hours. Like we talked about having 6 meals. There's no benefit to that. 3 to 4 meals for most people is generally considered pretty normal. You're combining your protein with carbs post-workout for optimal recovery. Again, we'll kind of talk about this in a minute, but the theory here is that carbs are going to spike your insulin, which is then going to further drive that recovery a little bit faster. And then the carbs are also going to replenish your glycogen stores. We'll get to that when we get to the carbohydrate side. But generally speaking, it's thought that this will be more valuable in terms of recovery. And I also kind of talked about this. You can use shakes and bars if whole foods aren't easily accessible for athletes, athletic populations. If you're traveling to the gym, moving around and not able to, it doesn't make sense to have a nice big full-blown meal 2 hours before you work out. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to have a protein bar or something kind of snack related, and that's definitely convenient. I'm 100% on board with that. I do that myself, basically living at the gym for work. It's just a lot easier for me to have a protein bar or a little bit of a protein shake 30 to 45, 60 minutes before I work out, then finish that shake again later. It's just more convenient than having a full-blown meal. Okay, so now we're going to talk about carbohydrates. Oh, the one thing I forgot to mention about the protein as I go back here really quickly is that protein carries 4 calories per gram. And I didn't put this on the slide because I'm going to talk about each one independently, and we're going to kind of get to this later on. But before I go, there's 4 calories per gram of protein. Very important to understand. Carbohydrates, so going back forward here, why are carbohydrates essential? So carbs are your body's primary fuel and energy source. It's what your body wants to use. And it's going to take carbohydrates, break that down into glucose, and then break that down into glycogen. That's as far as I'm going to go on the science side of how it works. But when you ingest those carbohydrates, your insulin response. And then you can only store carbohydrates in 2 places, your liver and your muscle. Once you have filled those stores, your body then will generally store it as fat. And that's why carbohydrates get a bad rap, is because that's what you do with excess carbohydrates. However, your body is good at using carbohydrates. So the nice thing is you're going to use those quite frequently. Carbohydrates are pretty essential for high-intensity endurance-based activities. Now, again, keto is getting popular. I'm going to do a whole presentation on just ketogenic dieting. But generally speaking, it is known that having full glycogen stores and having carbohydrates at your disposal is going to be a better source of energy for physical activity. There are some benefits of having lower carbohydrate-based diet. I did a presentation just like this on carb cycling last week. I'll have that in the description box below so that you can check it out if you miss it. But use carbs for your energy source. You're just going to work out and feel better. And especially if you don't have any kind of other major health issues, it's going to say otherwise that you shouldn't. Carbohydrates are also going to support sustained performance during training competition. So it's important that while you're working out hard or while you're training in competition and doing practices, that you continue to get some carbohydrates in your bloodstream and can try to keep those stores relatively full. Because you're using that as the primary fuel source, think of it, you go into practice with your tank completely full. As the practice goes, you continue to go into that fuel tank. You're going to continue to burn that down. If you've got a long practice, or you're a distance runner, or you've got hard lifting and training, you start to burn those glycogen stores. If you're taking some glycogen in, it's kind of like pumping some gas back into your tank every single time you take a drink. It's going to help you prevent from bottoming out and getting below that quarter of a tank, because then you want to make sure that you perform well again the next practice or the next workout or anything else that you might happen to do in life outside of the gym. You want to make sure you have that energy available. So the key functions of carbohydrates It's your primary energy source. We've kind of already talked about that, but it can be quickly converted into glucose for immediate energy. The conversion is much easier rather than going from protein or fat. There's more steps available to make that happen. And with carbohydrates, it's not as much. It's vital for stuff like sprints, heavy lifting, and endurance-based efforts. Again, you can do those things without carbohydrates, but your body's primary fuel source that it likes to use. So if you have it readily available, it's going to make your life tremendously easier from a performance side. Since we're talking about performance, specifically with these macronutrients, that's what you want to understand. In terms of glycogen replenishment, it's going to help rebuild those energy stores in your muscles post-exercise. So, we talked about the gas tank analogy. You're going to burn that away, so it's going to help replenish that. And then it's going to help prevent fatigue and support more recovery for those future workouts, as we kind of mentioned. And this is generally why ingesting carbohydrates post-workout has kind of become, considered important, is that especially if you're not drinking carbohydrates during your workout, you're going to go, or your training, you're going to burn through those. And if you don't replenish them enough, then your next workout could potentially suffer if it happens to be another long duration based workout. So the theory here is just to continue to keep your muscle glycogen stores relatively high so that when it comes time to perform and do stuff, energy is not the reason you can't give high effort. And from a performance perspective, that's incredibly important for athletes. When it comes to lifting and training, it's not necessarily as important, but if you're trying to build as much muscle, as much strength, as much explosiveness and power, then you don't want your fuel source to be the reason why you're not making progress. Carbohydrates are going to help you let you do that. So the best sources of carbohydrates in general, whole grains, so your brown rice, your oats, your quinoa, whole grain grains and pastas are easily things that majority of people like to eat and can get a good benefit from. You're going to have your fruits and your vegetables are also ways to get carbohydrates. Your bananas, berries, sweet potatoes, leafy greens, they have carbohydrates as well. They are not as high or as dense as the whole grains because these things have water in them. And having water means you're going to have less carbohydrates. That's what kind of gives them the sustenance. That's what makes them, I think anybody knows if you bite into a strawberry or a berry, it's watery, it's juicy, and that's water from the plant, right? So, but there's not as much carbohydrates as in the whole grains, just so you know, in terms of if you need higher carbohydrate intakes. But generally speaking, your fruits and your vegetables are going to have much better fiber content, and they're also going to have a great source of vitamins and minerals that are just good for your health. So you want a good balance there. And then there's starchy foods, potatoes, legumes, corn. In my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, but I would like to consider these almost like empty-based carbohydrates. There's still good things about these. There's still fiber, there's still micronutrients in them, but generally speaking, they're called starchy because they have more calories. So they're a good blend between the two. So when you're adjusting your carbohydrates, ideally you want to make sure you're getting a mix of the grains, the fruits and vegetables, and the starchy-based foods, especially as a high-performing athlete or somebody that trains incredibly hard. Very important. Carb timing for optimal energy. Now, again, this is not exactly everything you have to do. This is just going to be for optimal-based energy and performance. Optimal being the keyword there. So before you work out, your carbs are going to provide energy for the intense training. You're going to have those carbs readily available. They're probably floating around in your bloodstream, getting used, so your body can immediately either restore them into your muscle tissue and or your liver, and it's also just going to be readily available to make constant contractions. So generally speaking, pre-workout, you want to eat about 30 to 60 grams of carbs 1 to 2 hours per exercise. This is not a lot of carbohydrates, if I'm being honest. 60 grams can be, but I know there's some high-performing athletes that will eat 70 to 100 grams before they train. 30 to 60 is not very much. We're talking like 1 piece of bread, 2 pieces of bread, depending what brand and how big a piece, but 1 to 2 pieces of bread. Here's what we're talking about for 36 grams of carbs. So you can have 1 slice of bread, some jelly, and you're going to be well into this range. Post-workout, it's going to help refill your glycogen stores and speed up the recovery. We kind of talked about that already with the protein. It's going to spike that insulin, and it's going to help drive those amino acids from the protein in to help make that recovery a little bit quicker. And then it's going to, again, Carbohydrates also pull water with them. So if you happen to be dehydrated, carbs are going to pull water into the muscle cells as well. Or so once it gets turned into glycogen or glucose and then turned into glycogen, will pull that water with it. Again, I'm not going crazy into science, but that will also help your recovery and your hydration, make you feel full. So you feel good. If you've ever worked out after having like a massive carbohydrate-based meal, you feel that huge pump. That's because you got a ton of glycogen, a ton of water in there, and you're just stretching those cells out. We want to rehydrate and recover those after each training session. And again, you're going to pair it with protein for ideal muscular repair and recovery. That's ideally what you want to do. So also we have available carb cycling. Again, I did this presentation last week. So again, you can adjust carb cycling to training. I'm not going to go too crazy in this because again, I got a whole hour podcast episode and presentation on this just by itself. But essentially, the very simple gist of carb cycling is that you can go back and forth between high and low carbohydrate days based on your activity level. And it's thought that this can give you a little more metabolic flexibility, improve hormones, improve your body composition. I'll leave that for you to decide. I want you to kind of experiment with you. I personally am a fan, but ideally up to you. High carbohydrate-based days are going to be saved for more of your intense or your long duration-based workouts. So that you have the energy for those, and then your lower carbohydrate-based days are going to be during your rest or your light training-based days. And it's, again, going to help optimize your energy use and maintain the body composition. Calories still matter. Again, you still got to stay in a calorie deficit if you want to lose weight. You still got to stay in a calorie surplus if you want to gain weight. But you're basically just match your carbohydrate intake based upon your activity level. For a lot of people, this can be very successful in terms of helping meet those demands. But if you're a beginner and probably watching or listening to this, generally speaking, having the same carbohydrate intake every single day makes it much easier to track. So practical tips here for the carbohydrates for athletes. Want to focus primarily on complex-based carbs for that sustained energy, the lower, slower duration release. At the end of the day, you can still lose weight eating all sugar. I don't recommend it. You're probably not going to feel good. But when it comes to weight loss and weight gain, the calories matter first, and the type that you have. There's other health benefits, but complex carbs are generally going to be more sustained, which is going to be better if you happen to be physically active or you're trying to lose weight. Especially complex carbs that make you feel fuller longer. You're going to be able to continue to work out well. It's going to help you there. And then the high performing side, you want that energy all the time. We're going to talk about that too. I've got on here to avoid processed-based sugars because they can cause energy crashes. Again, research is a little bit mixed on this. You want to live your life, enjoy some food that you like. That's important. But the goal is you're trying to optimize your performance. Ideally, you would steer clear from that as much as you can. Eat more whole foods, complex grains. We're going to be overall improving your health and making you feel better. But at the end of the day, there's also the hard gainers. People have a hard time gaining weight. You just need to get food into your system. I personally used to love eating gummy bears and Sour Patch Kids post-workout because it was just a fast way to get glycogen in. And, as a high-performing athlete at that time, getting in calories, especially as I was trying to gain weight or gain strength, sometimes was a pain in the butt. So I think there's a time and a place, but for most people, if you can avoid the processed-based sugars, the better off you're going to be for your long-term health. Then you want to adjust your carbohydrate intake based upon your daily intensity and your goals. That would be the most ideal way to do things. It's also going to keep your body composition in check. It's going to automatically kind of balance your calorie needs for the day. So I think there's a lot of benefits there. But again, you can kind of adjust your carb intake as you wish. But still should be pretty high if you're a high-performing athlete or you're taking your training serious. All right, so let's talk about fats here. So why are fats important? So fats provide long-term energy for endurance-based activities. So fats are unique in that, one, they're going to have 9 calories per gram, so they're the most dense of the 3 macronutrients, and that's important because that means you can eat less fat and get just as much energy, if not more, depending upon how you're kind of doing that. But generally speaking, you're going to get over double the amount of energy from a gram versus a carb or a protein. So that's incredibly important. It's essential for your overall health in terms of supporting your hormones and your joint health. So you can't just stop eating fat. It's incredibly important for you. It's also going to help you absorb certain vitamins. A, D, and K are fat-soluble vitamins. So for your body to absorb those vitamins and use them and see the health benefits, you need to make sure that you're ingesting them with fat. So that's why having fat at your meals is incredibly important. And it's critical for athletes who need that sustained energy. The nice thing is that breaking down fat takes some time. And to break it and to use it, if your body to use it for energy-based sources, that's why it's good for endurance-based athletes. It's going to give that sustained energy, and having that available in your body and ingesting is important. Obviously, if you're trying to lose weight, your body is going to want to try to burn fat. And so if you don't give it enough fuel, it's going to use its fat stores and burn that. That's basically what weight loss is. It's going to pull the fat that your body has stored over time to sustain that. That's why your body stores fat or your excess food as fat, because it's basically saving it for later, saying, hey, if something happens and we don't get enough food, we have a way to take what's on our body and now convert it into an energy substrate so that we can actually perform and do stuff. So it all comes down to just general science and human adaptation to everything that we're doing. So some key functions for fats. Again, long-term energy source, ideal for low to moderate intensity-based activities. So that's the way that I like to think about fats personally, is it's long and slow. Your carbs are short and fast. Easy way to think about it. You provide over twice the energy per gram compared to carbs and protein. I already mentioned that. So again, 9 calories per gram of fat, 4 for carbs and protein. And if you're curious, alcohol is 7. I don't have alcohol on here. It's not what you want to ingest for your performance side. On the hormone production and joint health side, it's going to support your testosterone and other hormones, vital for recovery and muscle growth. So, testosterone is incredibly important for guys. It's also important for girls. You want to make sure you have enough fat so that your hormones stay upregulated. Those lipids from the fats are linked directly to those hormones. And it can help lubricate your joints and reduce inflammation. It's going to help your body feel better. The leaner you are, usually the more your joints are going to feel a little more achy. As somebody that has gotten incredibly lean and performed at a high level, I can definitely attest to that, as I have let that go a little bit. I'm not as nearly as lean as I used to be. My joints generally do feel better, but I still have some issues, but that's besides the point. Generally speaking, there's going to be a healthy medium. You don't want to be too lean, but you also don't want to be too fat. Got to be in a healthy range there, especially if you're a high-performing athlete. All right, so the best sources of healthy fats. Got some different examples here. Avocados, they're rich in monounsaturated fats. Again, I'm not going into the crazy details of this on the science side, but there's mono and poly unsaturated based fats, and it's literally what it means. Mono means there's one. Poly means there's several strains of the chains of those fats in terms of how your body uses it. And then there's also saturated based fat. Saturated fat comes from animal sources, where the unsaturated can come from nuts and seeds and different things. But saturated is always linked to animal-based sources. So when you look at that nice, good, thick, juicy piece of bacon, you can literally see the saturated fat on it. You're literally ingesting that. That's easy to see. And that's kind of how I like to think about it when I talk to people about this, is that if you can physically see the fat, then it's saturated. And then, if you're eating your nuts and your seeds and your oils, generally speaking, those are your unsaturated fats. You're going to have your nuts and your seeds, so almonds, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, you name it. If it's a nut and a seed, great source of fat. You're going to have your olive oil, so heart healthy, fat for cooking and dressings. You can also have different types of oils. So I just listed olive oil, but generally you want your oils to come from actual things. You don't want the processed-based oils. And then you're going to have the fatty fish option. So salmon, mackerel, sardines for your omega-3s. Very good for your body, your hair, skin, nails, eyes, brain, lots of benefits from that. If you can't get much fish in your diet, I highly recommend that you take an omega-3 supplement to make sure you are getting that. There's a ton of health benefits behind that. It's also going to help reduce like inflammation, and it's known to be good for like your immune system. There's just a lot of great benefits to omega-3s. So eating fish is incredibly good for you. But again, if you don't eat it or you don't have access to it, you're inland like myself, supplementing with omega-3s is highly recommended, in my opinion, for high-performing athletes, just for overall health, but it will help you perform better as well. And again, if you can't get the fats, then you're obviously going to miss out on those fats. So you're going to have to get your fats from other places, and you can substitute that with fattier-based protein sources like beef. There's a balance between fat intake and your athletic goals. So obviously you don't want to eat a ton of fat. It's probably going to upset your stomach, but you do need it. So I kind of gave a range here of fats being about 20 to 35% of your daily calories for most athletes. Again, this can tweak a little bit, but more than likely you're going to end up in that 20-35% range of your total calories. And then balancing your fat with your carbs and your protein is what's going to be ideal to optimize your energy performance. As soon as you start taking away one macronutrient, generally there's problems. Not always, but you want the protein to recover, the carbs, the instant energy source, and the fat for the hormonal profile and that long duration based energy. And then excessive fat intake can slow down your digestion, but it doesn't necessarily cause sluggishness. So because it does take a longer to download, excuse me, it does take a little bit longer for your body to break down and use. It can sit in your stomach a little bit longer, but it shouldn't make you sluggish. Now, if you eat 100 grams of fat in one go, you're not going to feel good, right? But you do want to make sure that it does take time. And since it does take time, it's theorized that taking fat in with protein at bedtime is great, and that's going to give you a longer, slow releasing source of recovery. But at the end of the day, just getting enough of that stuff in throughout the days is important. But if you are trying to draw that out overnight, or you're trying to gain weight, that can be a nice little hack for you there. So it's debunking some myths about fat. The first one being that eating fat makes you sluggish. That's not true. Healthy fats are important for enhanced endurance and recovery. We kind of just talked about this, but they're not going to make you sluggish. They are just slower in terms of how they are absorbed and how they're broken down. And you're usually moving in a slower endurance-based activity, optimizing your fat stores in terms of using them for your energy source. Low-fat diets are better for athletes. It's not true. Restricting fat can actually harm your hormones and long-term energy. You want to have ideally a relatively balanced diet for athletic performance, maybe even a little bit more higher towards the carbohydrates, but you still want to make sure fat is part of your diet. And this is generally seen as an issue with a lot of females. This can really harm your hormone health. So make sure you're getting enough fat. You never want your fat, in my opinion, you never want your fat below 35 grams. Bodybuilders, people focusing on physique athletes like that may rival that and get them pretty low. But generally speaking, we're talking about performance here. And then another myth is that fat makes you fat. It's not true. Just because you eat the fat doesn't mean it automatically turns into fat. Again, it's just an energy source. Just being in a calorie surplus is what makes you fat. And that's carbs, protein, fat. Doesn't matter. If you just eat too much food, you are going to get overweight. Just the way it works. And the same thing is opposite. If you want to lose weight, you just got to be in a calorie deficit and ideally having, again, a balanced diet. So practical tips for fat consumption. You want to choose whole food fat sources instead of the processed oils. It's kind of obvious, I feel like, but if you're looking at fried foods, not a good source of fat. Just not. Yes, it's a fat source, not ideal though. We want quality fat sources coming from those animal sources, the fish sources, the eggs, the nuts. Those are, the seeds, the oils, the healthy oils like olive oil or coconut oil would be preferred. You want to pair your fats with carbs and protein for balanced meals. I've kind of repeated this for several times, but that's ideally how you want to do it, especially from an absorption of vitamins. And then you want to use fats strategically to avoid high-fat meals immediately before your training. Okay, that's a huge thing here, is that if you have too much fat before you train, you're probably going to have some digestive issues. And that's the last thing that you want to have happen if you're competing or if you're working out, is to have digestive-based issues. So lower fat going into your training. Still a little bit of fat because you want that slow release of energy throughout those workouts, but you just don't want a lot of it. And macronutrient ratios and performance goals. So why macronutrient ratios matter for your performance goals. We're going to kind of talk about balancing the protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Ideal, again, I'm kind of feeling like a broken record here, but that's what's ideal for performance. Is ideal for weight loss, for weight gain. It's just the most ideal way to handle things. But the ratios can depend upon your sport, your training intensity, your recovery needs. The ratios can fluctuate quite a bit. And that's kind of like what carb cycling revolves around, and ketogenic based revolves, all that kind of just revolves around moving your macronutrients around. But it can fluctuate for each individual person. And then we also want to make sure that incorrect ratios can actually hinder performance or recovery. And the main thing here that you understand there is that if you don't have enough fat, we talked about those super low fat diets, your energy levels are going to feel like crap. Okay. Your hormones are going to go to crap. We don't want that. On the other side, having no carbohydrates, you're going to start to feel sluggish initially. You can adjust in the ketogenesis, but again, if you have carbohydrates, you are going to run faster. You are going to jump higher. You are going to lift more weight. Your body will adapt, but the research says that's what's going to happen because it's your primary fuel source. So, macronutrients needs by sport. I kind of list some things here to kind of give you some ideas, but it's not the end all be all, but to give you a generalization here. Strength-based sports, think of your powerlifting, your weightlifting, high protein for obviously your muscle repair and growth. So definitely want to emphasize the protein pretty heavily here because every single day you're in the gym, you're breaking that muscle tissue down. You want to build that back. So you want a higher protein-based diet. You want to have moderate carbs for enough energy to sustain your workouts, give you those bursts. You are going to rely on that creatine phosphate-based system to do majority of your work. So we do want to make sure that we have enough carbohydrates in our diet. It's also going to keep your muscles full, feeling good. And there's a moderate fat for the hormonal support side of things, slower duration. Your workouts shouldn't be crazy long. Ideally, hour and a half is kind of the sweet spot. But I've been in groups. I know that powerlifting training sometimes can take 2 hours. Been there. So having fat is still important. For your endurance-based sports, though, high carbs are definitely preferred because you are very, very active all the time. So you want that for sustained energy. You want your glycogen stores to be ideally full every single time you go out for a run or you go do your endurance-based activity. Even if we talk about like soccer, the amount of mileage they can get, you want a higher carb-based diet for those. Then you want moderate protein for recovery. Again, there's a bottom tier, that 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight is definitely the minimum, but you can fluctuate this to moderate to high depending upon how active you are, how much you're training. And then you want a little bit lower fat to avoid the sluggish digestion during your activity. So definitely around your activity, you want to keep that fat lower, but it can still be a moderate level in terms of total consumption. But you just want to make sure that you're not having that crazy fat diet, or those fats are not front loaded before you go have to do like an hour and a half, 2 hour run. Not ideal, right? So running, cycling, things like that, save those fats for away from the workouts, and then you should be good. Your mixed-based sports, so here think soccer, CrossFit, basketball, football, wrestling. You want to balance carbs and protein for energy and recovery, and then a moderate fat to support the endurance of those sports. So everything's kind of relatively level here. And you can fluctuate it based upon what you need. If you're very, very active in these sports, then maybe you can have your carbohydrate on the higher side. If you're not as active in them, you can have them a little bit lower, but generally speaking, you're kind of moderate across the board here. So customizing macros for your training and recovery, we can match this to our intensity level. So looking at how intense you train. If you've got a higher intensity, you're ideally going to want more carb for energy. It's a general rule of thumb. If you got lower intensity, a more balanced approach to those macronutrients, slightly higher in fats, since you're not going to need as much carbohydrates to do those intense activities. Again, just based on intensity. We look at training duration. We want our longer sessions to, again, prioritize carbs and fats. If you're doing something for a long period of time, we want to make sure our energy levels can be as high as possible because we've got to do them for a long period amount of time. Your shorter sessions, you're going to emphasize protein for your recovery side and still going to have some carbs and fats, obviously, but they're not as important. So your shorter sessions, you're not going to burn through those substrates and those energy sources nearly as much, so you don't have to worry about it. Think about if you go to do something hard for 15 minutes, you're probably not really going to burn a whole lot of calories, being honest, but you can still do quite a bit of muscle damage during that time. So that's how you kind of want to look at things. In terms of your recovery, protein's obviously key for your muscle repair. We've already talked about that. Your carbs are going to replenish those glycogen stores, and the fat's going to support the hormone regulation during that. So gives you an idea in terms of like, how do I need to recover from this? You can kind of have an idea. Again, balanced approach ideally, but kind of lets you have a cheat sheet of what you should be picking to eat and put on your plate or ingest. So some common mistakes in balancing your macronutrients out. The first one would be overloading protein. You only need so much protein to recover. So excess can go elsewhere in your diet. And what I mean by that is again, we'll take myself, for example. I only need about 150-ish grams of protein to recover. Maybe a little bit more. I can go up to like 160 or 165. Anything more than that, it's probably kind of wasted my time, right? There's not going to be a good return on investment there. But if I went from eating 100 to 150, my recovery is going to probably feel tremendously better than when I was at 100. So make sure you get enough protein, but you don't have to overdo it. I don't need 200 grams of protein. Not going to give me a whole lot. Take those other calories and emphasize them towards carb and fat. And the other nice thing is, generally those are the good tasting foods, right? Your carbohydrates and your fats. Another common mistake with macronutrients is under eating carbs for endurance. So I think a lot of endurance athletes don't truly understand how important it is to have a lot of carbohydrates in their diets. And if you can find during your runs and your longer activities that you're doing that you're feeling fatigued and you're having poor performance at the end, that could be linked to your carbohydrate-based stores. So you really want to make sure that you're constantly shoveling and feeding in carbohydrates to keep your endurance performance on the high end. There's also common mistaken issue of people fearing fat. We kind of already talked about some fat myths. Again, low fat intake can harm your hormonal profile and your overall recovery. Don't think that fat means that you're going to get fat. Make sure you're getting enough quality fat in your diet to absorb those vitamins, improve your hormones, and feel good and have good sustained energy. And then you want to make sure that you're not ignoring your recovery nutrition. So, skipping out on carbs and protein post-workout can delay your recovery, and not like immediately, but if you have a workout and then you wait, 6-8 hours, your body's pretty hungry for some fuel and for some recovery, and your body is going to want to use that to optimize it. At the end of the day, you're probably still going to be okay, but if we're talking about you improving your performance, doing all the things at a hard level, and you're training hard, you're doing those things, you want to optimize your performance, right? So getting carbs and protein around your workout is going to be the most optimized way to do that. So don't put yourself in a hole if you don't have to. Some practical tips here for athletes in terms of figuring out these performance goals. I kind of got some numbers here for you. Again, it's just a baseline ratio, tweak them for you, but this is a good starting point for most people that if you are a strength athlete, so powerlifter, weightlifter, bodybuilder, this is a good ratio of 30% of your calories come from protein, 30% from fat, 40% from carbs. It's kind of a good old-fashioned ratio that you're probably going to find about anywhere on the internet as kind of like a gold standard to start. Your endurance athletes, 25% protein, 25% fats, 50% carbs. Again, we just kind of took the fats and the protein, pulled them down a little bit, and we pushed the carbs up because, again, you need the glycogen stores being high. So you're going to just put those there. And the percentages here look low on the protein and fat, but you have to think most endurance athletes are eating more total calories than a strength athlete or something like that, right? So if we take somebody, let's say a strength athlete's eating 2,400 calories per day, to maintain weight and improve performance, endurance athlete's probably going to need 27, 3,000, 3,300, depending upon how active they are. your 25% becomes much more. It's going to get your protein higher just by default because you're eating more calories. That's why the percentages can be a little bit lower. So don't think that lower percentage means you're eating less food. It's just that percentage can be lower because the total calories are higher for this specific population I'm talking about in terms of endurance athletes. And then those mixed athletes that are doing a variety of things, soccer, basketball, wrestling, using different energy systems quite a bit. Again, 30% protein, 20% fat, 50% carbs. And again, because their activity level is probably higher than like a strength athlete, the fats can be a little bit lower, but we're going to have protein be a little bit higher because they are going to have those repeated bursts, and that can be a little more damaging. But ideally, what I got here is that you want to track your intake and listen to what your body, if you're really sore all the time, you may want to make sure you got enough protein in. If you feel really sluggish during your sprints and your hard activities, you may want to make sure you got enough carbohydrates in. If you feel that your energy is low towards the end of things, you may want to start to look at your fats, or your hormones come back weird in your blood work. You may want to take a look at what you're eating from a fat perspective to kind of figure that out. So more practical tips for athletes here. Nutrition is a performance tool. It's going to help you do the things that you want to do better, and it is a very crucial foundation piece of what you do. You can be super athletic, you can work really hard, but if you're not putting the fuel and the substrates that you need through your mouth to optimize your performance, you're never going to see your maximum potential. It all starts with nutrition. Once you obviously doing the actual work, right? So proper nutrition can enhance your performance, your recovery, and your endurance. We know that. That's why this is important for you. Strategic meal planning can maximize your training outcomes. So, making sure that you're getting a solid meal in, 60 to 90 minutes before you go do practice and games and work out if you're going to the gym. Same thing afterwards. If you know you're not going to be able to get a solid meal in, you want to make sure you take some protein and some carbohydrates with you after you train so that you can, again, begin to start that recovery process, ideally a little bit sooner, fueling up those glycogen stores back, recovering the muscle tissue after you work out hard. And, kind of just already bled into that. The pre and post workout meals are critical for your energy and recovery if you take your training, your workouts, and your progress seriously. You want to plan your meals around your training sessions. So for your pre-workout meals, aim for carbs and protein 1 to 3 hours before your training. Provide energy and prevent muscle breakdown is what you're thinking about here from a pre-workout meal perspective, or post-workout meal perspective, or after training. Focus on carbohydrates and protein 30 to 2 hours. And then what you're going to eat there can kind of fluctuate depending on how soon you're going to get food in your body. Again, you don't have to down that protein shake immediately after you walk off the training floor. If you're going back home, going to a dorm, going out to eat after your workout, you're probably going to be fine. But if you're not going to get that solid meal, then yes, you do want to plan ahead. You do want to maybe take some protein powder, some carbohydrates with you to the gym so that you have something that can hold you over to that next meal. And then you're going to store that glycogen stores. It's going to aid your muscle repair, all that great stuff. So the importance of the nutrient timing here for the practical tips is that, the pre-workout's fueling your workout is to help prevent the fatigue so that you can do the things harder and longer in the moment. Give better effort so you can get a better stimulus. And then it can also help stabilize your blood sugar levels. I'm sure many people, myself included, have felt that wooziness. You feel your blood sugar drop. That feels terrible during your workout. You don't want that to happen. And then afterwards, again, kickstart recovery, can reduce your muscle soreness. Not to say it's going to eliminate it, but having that can reduce your soreness. And then it's going to enhance your muscle protein synthesis so you can build more muscle tissue if that's part of your goal. And if it's not, then you're running whatever. You're just helping that muscle tissue recover for the next bout that you're going to do. Pre-workout meal and snack ideas. Again, 1 to 3 hours before. Some examples here. You can have like grilled chicken, sweet potato, vegetables, nice balanced diet here. Oatmeal with some fruit and almond butter. That's kind of a vegetarian-based approach here. In terms of snacks, if you're having to eat 30 or 60 minutes before you work out, banana with peanut butter, Greek yogurt, and honey. Again, a decent amount of protein, carbs, and fats all here mentioned. Post-workout meal, again, within the 2 hours. So you're going to eat a solid meal. Again, these are just examples, but salmon, rice, broccoli, turkey wrap, avocado, some kind of vegetables, greens are great. You can also add in, some rice into that if you're having to do a snack, so say you're not going to be able to get that immediate solid meal, that a protein shake is fruit, cottage cheese, pineapple, protein shake, and quick digesting source. I really like bread. I love doing jelly sandwiches post-workout when I was at Purdue. All great things that you can take with you. Your pre-workout meal and snack ideas. I've already kind of went over those. I think I pasted that on there twice. I did. I apologize for that. And some key takeaways here. So you made it here 50 minutes through this episode. If you did, I really appreciate it. So here's the key takeaways. Your protein is going to build and repair your muscle tissue. Make it a part of every single meal. Just get in the habit of putting protein on your plate every single time you work or every single time you eat. That's going to help you optimize your recovery to make it easier to hit those protein goals. Protein should be the front runner to what you're putting on your plate. Carbs are going to be your go-to for your energy, so you don't want to be scared of them. They're not going to make you fat. If you want to have energy while you're working out and while you're doing your sport, carbohydrates are important. That's the next thing you put on your plate. Then you're going to go to fats, being essential for your endurance, your recovery. You want to ideally choose those healthy sources. Then, if you've got the fats in with your protein source already, you can kind of skip this. But if not, you want to make sure you're eating some nuts, you're eating some fish, you're using oil on a salad, things of that nature to get that fat intake. And then timing your nutrition around your training can maximize your results. Again, it's not the end all be all, but if we want to maximize what we're getting from what we're doing in the gym, in our sport practices, in our games, we want to maximize that by getting enough fuel source before and enough fuel to recover afterwards. You don't want to over rely on one macronutrient. All three are essential. So, you don't want to just fear carbs and just eat fat and protein. You don't want to go too crazy low on the fats because you're not going to have those optimal hormones. And protein, you want to make sure you have all the time. You're not going to recover well if you don't want to have it. So all three are important. You're going to adjust those macros based upon your training intensity, duration, goals. Going to make it specific towards you, what works well with your lifestyle, what you kind of like, how you kind of like to eat. Those can all fluctuate a little bit, and I gave you some examples. And then you want to make sure that you're not skipping meals, you're not ignoring your recovery nutrition. You don't want to go long durations without food if performance is important to you. Food is going to give you the fuel for that. It's kind of the foundation of everything that you're going to do so that you can perform and do all the great things. And that's going to wrap up today's episode and video, Macronutrient 101, the role of protein, carbs, and fats for performance. So again, today's video was covering the basics. For many people, this seems very simple, but there's a lot of people, I think, that just really don't understand the value of simple quality nutrition for performance, especially if you're an athlete, especially if you work out, people trying to lose weight, gain weight. This all becomes incredibly important. And I do, as somebody that works with youth athletes, this is a huge glaring hole for many kids. They eat bad. They don't eat quality food. They don't eat enough food. It's usually more so the females there, but not always. They don't eat enough food to sustain their performance, and then they wonder why they're banged up. They don't feel good. They don't perform well. They're not maximizing their efforts everywhere else. In my opinion, it's easy to go to the gym and work out. It's easy to do your strength conditioning. It's easy to go to practice. It's easy to get up shots. It's easy to do drills. It's not easy to do this stuff. It's not easy to get enough protein, get enough sleep, get enough carbohydrates, make sure you get enough fat, get enough hydration, get enough salt. Those are the harder things that people generally are skipping out on. So if you're an athlete listening to this is my thing for you. If you do this, you are going to get ahead of a lot of people. If you're trying to gain weight, you're trying to lose weight in terms of like strength, powerlifting, weightlifting, whatever. Again, awesome stuff here to just get the needle moving in the right direction. Because again, going to the gym is the easy part. Working out 3 to 4 hours a week is really not that hard. It's doing all the other stuff, all this stuff outside of the gym that's going to kind of hold you back. So if you happen to be listening to this after the fact, watching this on YouTube after the fact, leave a comment below on the YouTube. I will get back to you as soon as you leave a comment, as soon as I'm able to. If you're listening to this on your lovely Spotify, Apple iTunes podcast of choice, thank you for listening after the fact. You can also contact me with questions on Instagram at bsmithley, at Team Thirst. Shoot me an email at thirst.training@gmail.com, and I will get back to you as well. And then also, as always, you can, got this at the bottom, save 10% at NutriBio.com with the code SMITLEY10 at checkout. That has changed. Changed it just a little bit, took the B off. So just Smitley, SMITLEY10 at checkout. It's going to save you 10% at NutriBio. Been with NutriBio for over a decade now. They are awesome. That's where you want to go get your good protein, your fish oil, your vitamin D, your multivitamin. I take all that stuff. Cannot recommend them enough for all your supplement needs. So if you happen to make today's video live at any point, thank you for coming. Listen after the fact. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Time is still to be determined. It's Thanksgiving week that week. Not too sure. I'll have it on all my social medias if you're interested in catching up with the next episode. And it will be another nutrition-related video. And then I'm going to shift to a training-based topic the following week. So I'm going to do a little bit of nutrition front-loaded, and then I'm going to kind of go back and forth doing some different topics. But there's a certain topic that you want to listen to or want me to discuss, leave it in the comment section below of this video, and I will make sure I take that into consideration so I can get to something that you want. And finally, before I go, if you happen to check out the YouTube video that dropped on Wednesday from my video editor guy, I'm just calling him M. He wants to kind of be anonymous here. M did an awesome job with that video. Really appreciate it. It looks nice, clean, and polished. I'm looking forward to work with him long term with these videos for my long form stuff. But as for now, the lives are just staying live. So thanks again for tuning in for today's episode 42, Thirst for More Podcast, Thirst Gym, YouTube video live. I'll see you next week. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll see you next Friday.